The morning in the national park began like any other. The air was fresh and warm, filled with the scent of damp earth, tree resin, and the soft coolness of last night's rain. Sunbeams barely pierced through the thick canopy, casting whimsical patterns of light and shadow on the forest floor. A group of tourists who had arrived the night before was now walking along a narrow trail near the edge of the jungle, accompanied by a local guide. People were smiling, photographing every movement in the treetops, capturing shots of birds and colorful butterflies, eager to share the untouched beauty of nature on social media. At first, everything seemed completely peaceful. Somewhere in the distance, the rhythmic buzzing of cicadas could be heard, and macaques chattered in the dense foliage. Occasionally, the flap of large wings echoed from deep within the forest, perhaps hornbills in flight. The guide explained that several elephant families lived in this region, but sightings were rare. The tourists nodded, not really expecting to see such a majestic creature. For them, it felt like an idyllic walk in paradise. But over time, the mood began to shift. Around midday, the sun grew hotter, shadows on the trail deepened, and a strange weight settled in the air. At first, it was barely noticeable, like nature was holding its breath. One by one, familiar sounds faded. The birds fell silent. The monkeys stopped calling to each other. Even the cicadas grew quieter. The guide began glancing over his shoulder more often, stopped joking, and focused intently on the path ahead. A few tourists sensed the silence too. It wasn't just quiet, it was unnerving, pressing down like the calm before a storm. Soon, the group reached a stretch of road that ran alongside the forest's edge. The trees thinned out, revealing a view of the valley, but even here, there was no sign of movement. No birds in the sky, no rustle in the underbrush, just a light breeze lazily stirring the leaves. The guide raised his hand, signaling everyone to stop. He closed his eyes for a few seconds, as if listening for something that couldn't be heard. Then he took a step forward, scanning the trees carefully. One of the tourists glanced at their watch, though time here, deep in the jungle, felt suspended. The group's mood had completely changed. Laughter had been replaced by silence. Some exchanged glances, others clenched the straps of their backpacks. The sense that something was wrong in the air grew stronger with each passing minute. No one knew yet that just a few turns ahead, they would encounter something that would redefine their understanding of wild nature. Something vast, tragic, and almost human in its emotional depth. The trail the group was following gradually narrowed, and the dense vegetation crept closer from both sides. The ground underfoot became softer, damp from a recent rain, and their footsteps sounded muffled, as if the forest itself was absorbing every sound. Suddenly, the guide slowed his pace. His attention had been caught by tracks on the path, deep imprints characteristic of a large, heavy animal. Without a word, he bent down to examine them and raised his hand, signaling everyone to stop. A silence fell, so thick it felt as if even the wind had paused. Only a few hearts began to beat faster, though no one yet understood why. Just a few steps ahead, around a bend in the path, a sight emerged that left them speechless. At the edge of a small clearing, among fallen leaves and slender branches, stood a fully grown elephant. Its massive body was almost motionless, but its gaze was fixed directly on the people. It neither moved nor threatened nor made a sound. And then, it did something no one expected. It slowly dropped to its knees, first its front legs, then its hind legs, and remained there. Its head bowed, trunk resting on the ground, and its eyes looked up as if trying to speak without words. The gesture was so deeply human that tears welled up in some eyes. This was not fear, not aggression. It was a cry from the soul. The elephant wasn't begging for food, nor was it defending itself. It was reaching out to those nearby. Some in the group even stepped back, overwhelmed by the intensity of emotion. Its skin was covered in dust, an old scar marked its ear, and a fresh wound on its shoulder oozed dried blood. But none of that drew the eye like the expression in its eyes, not pain, but anxiety, and a plea. The guide finally stepped forward, careful not to make sudden movements. He slowly circled the elephant and then suddenly stopped. Behind the elephant, hidden in tall grass, lay a small figure. It was a baby elephant, motionless, lying on its side. Even from a distance, it was clear the calf was either severely injured or already gone. The adult was likely its mother or father, and everything it had done, kneeling, watching, waiting, was a desperate attempt to get help, to explain something it couldn't say out loud. Its stillness, its lowered head, its gaze from below, it was all a cry to be understood. Some of the tourists began to cry. The scene was so moving, so tragic, that even the most indifferent among them felt their hearts clench. This mighty creature knelt not from fear, but from love and grief. Its posture spoke louder than any words. Help, look, understand. It didn't retreat or run. It just remained there until it was sure the people had seen what it came to show. And when one of them pulled out a radio and began to speak into it, the elephant lifted its head, and for a brief moment, hope flickered in its eyes. Time seemed to freeze. The group stood in stunned silence as the guide spoke urgently into his radio. His voice was quiet but tense. He gave coordinates, requested immediate assistance, and explained the situation briefly but clearly. The tourists didn't interfere. No one dared to move. Ahead, on the edge of the clearing, the elephant was still kneeling, motionless, like a statue raised by nature itself as a monument to grief and hope at once. The wait was excruciating. Minutes stretched like hours. The elephant didn't move. Occasionally it rocked gently forward and back, as if soothing itself, trying to remain calm. From time to time, it turned its head toward the calf, touching its back gently with its trunk, as if checking, had anything changed? There was so much love and pain in those gestures that even without words, it was clear. This was a parent mourning its child. One of the tourists tried to take a photo, but lowered the camera almost immediately. It felt like they were witnessing something far too private, too intimate, sacred, even in its sorrow. Finally, the distant sound of an engine broke the silence. A wildlife rescue vehicle appeared on a narrow path, and 3 men stepped out, carrying medical supplies and tools. They approached cautiously, without sudden movements. The elephant raised its head, alert but not hostile. Its eyes watched every step. One of the workers knelt beside the calf, ran a hand along its side, checked for breath. Then, without a word, he turned to the others and slowly shook his head. The baby elephant had been dead for several hours. A heavy silence fell. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath. The elephant remained kneeling, as if not fully accepting the truth. It extended its trunk toward the people, stopping just a foot away. It wasn't a gesture of threat or protest, more a gesture of trust. It seemed to be asking, "Do you understand why I'm here? Do you see I'm not your enemy? Can you feel my pain?" The rescuers exchanged glances, and one of them stepped closer, gently touching the trunk. In that moment, the tension in the air lifted. A silent connection formed between human and animal. After a brief discussion, it was decided to leave the calf's body until evening, to give the adult elephant a chance to say goodbye. Taking the body immediately would have been cruel. The elephant clearly didn't want to part just yet. It didn't attack, but it made its intention clear. While it remained, no one would touch the baby. The humans stepped back, giving space and silence. The tourists stood apart, many with tears in their eyes. This was more than observing wildlife. This was bearing witness to real grief, a profound emotion that erased the lines between species, between human and animal. The elephant stayed beside the body for a long time. Sometimes it lifted its head and looked into the distance. Sometimes it stood with its trunk hanging down. Its posture spoke not only of mourning, but of inner strength. It didn't scream, didn't rage, didn't destroy anything around it. It simply stood, still, quiet, full of pain. That image stayed with every witness forever. The sun tilted toward the horizon, and the air gradually cooled. The forest filled with soft evening sounds. Insects chirped, a bird called out in the distance, yet none of it disturbed the overwhelming silence. The elephant still stood beside the calf, its massive shadow stretched across the grass, blocking the final rays of light filtering through the leaves. It no longer moved or looked around, frozen in a state of quiet meditation. Time had stopped for it. The people no longer felt fear, tension, or even pity. They felt respect, deep, instinctive respect. Before them was not just an animal, but a being enduring the same pain any human might. No one rushed to leave the clearing, even when the rescuers explained that they needed to transport the calf's body before dark. Everyone silently nodded, but remained still. The elephant sensed what was happening. It made no move to stop the people, no display of aggression. It lifted its head, cast one final look at the calf, and slowly stepped aside. The movement seemed almost unbearable, as though every muscle resisted the separation. It walked just a few paces before stopping and looking back. In that moment, every person watching felt it. This elephant understood everything: the pain, the loss, and that nothing would be the same afterward. As the calf was gently lifted and placed into a transport frame, the adult elephant did not interfere. It simply watched. Its eyes glistened in the last light of day. No one could say for sure. Was it moisture from the forest air or real tears? But one thing was certain. This felt more like a funeral than a rescue operation. The people moved gently, slowly, avoiding any abrupt motion. Even the most pragmatic among them dropped their masks of detachment. One worker lowered his gaze, another turned away. It was too hard to watch the silent farewell of a creature that had truly loved. The elephant remained still even after the vehicle began to move. It didn't follow, nor did it walk away right away. It stood there until the headlights disappeared among the trees. Only after a few minutes did it slowly turn and walk into the forest. Its back seemed broader, its gait wearier. But there was no defeat in its departure. There was dignity. It had fulfilled its role to the very end. It had proven that animals are capable of emotion, of intention, of love, and of saying goodbye. Every person who had witnessed that moment left the clearing changed, softer, more aware, more human. A few days later, footage of the scene spread across the internet. Thousands of comments poured in. Some couldn't stop crying. Others, for the first time, began to question just how intelligent and emotional animals truly are. The story of the elephant who fell to its knees before people to ask for help and to say goodbye became a symbol not just of loss, but of interspecies connection. It led many to reevaluate their relationship with nature, because sometimes the loudest stories are told in silence. And that evening in the forest became just that, a quiet, tragic, yet deeply human story, told without words, yet understood by all.